So this is a poll here asking about the Azure technologies that you have used. Some of these will be mentioned in today's presentation, just to give you a chance. Here we have 31% participation, and now I see 46% of our audience attending today, 50%. So you'll see the poll now shared on the screen. You can see that, of course, a lot of people have used Power BI. Power BI is, we have a desktop version, but the intention is to leverage the full power by using the Azure version, and I'll just leave it at that, and Brad will, of course, be talking about that topic as he now presents the session. But let me introduce our presenter today, Brad. Of course, many of you attended last week, and Brad's now showing his initial screen here. But he's a senior data science consultant with Centelli Solutions, Charlotte, North Carolina, and a data scientist. So he's got a master's in statistics from University of South Carolina, MCSC certification in data management and analytics, and also MCSC in cloud platform and infrastructure. And then also he says he's working at MCSA. I will mention as a side note, Brad talked last week about careers, and he not only preaches the message about certifications being important for your personal learning, just filling in the full story on what these technologies are and giving you a more confident presentation in your professional career by doing these certifications. Of course, he's walking that walk. So let's now have our presentation today from Brad. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me. Hello, everyone. My name is Brad Llewellyn, like we talked about. I am a senior data science consultant at Centelli Solutions. And what I mainly do is I walk customers or individuals kind of through the path of data science and how they can make it work for them. So the purpose of this talk today is for you to step in my shoes and kind of do what I do for a living. And we're going to walk through a fictitious customer who has 4 real problems. These are problems I've actually seen throughout my career, and we're going to talk about the different ways we can use Azure technologies to solve those. So a little bit about me. We've talked mostly about me. I've got the alphabet soup of certifications and whatnot. I've been in the consulting game for a little over 5 years. I just started at Centelli recently. If you like what you hear and you want to learn more about this type of stuff, you can find me on LinkedIn or Twitter or my blog at Breaking BI. I've got my personal email address there as well in case you want to reach out if you have questions or comments. I'm also one of the leaders of the local PASS organization here in Charlotte called the Charlotte BI Group. So if you're in the area or even just passing through on the first Tuesday of every month, come check us out. We have a lot of great speakers that talk about everything ranging from a SQL Server all the way up to data science. So we'd love to have you. I definitely want to give a big thanks to the Data Science Virtual Group and Mark for having me. I also want to encourage everybody here, if you're really looking to advance your career, whether it's just to learn more or whether to get a better job or just to have a happier life, I highly encourage everyone to not only attend these types of webinars, but also apply to be a presenter. You don't have to be a super expert in everything to be a presenter. Just have one topic you're passionate about and people would love to hear you talk about it. And also volunteer as much as you can, whether it's by volunteering to help one of these virtual groups like this one or a local group in your area. I just encourage everybody to get involved because that's definitely what has helped my career take off. So today, like I said, we're going to step in my shoes, but we're going to step in a very specific way. The question we really want to answer today is, what's the easiest way to solve the business problem? There are a lot of extremely smart people who try to solve problems in complicated ways because they think that's the way they have to do it, when from a business sense, the more complicated approach isn't always the better one. In fact, oftentimes a simpler approach is the better answer. So the question is, how can we as consultants, as experts, apply that logic and create the easiest solution to the problem? So first, let's define what is an easy solution. If we're trying to make these solutions that are easy, what criteria do we have to follow? First criteria is the most important one. Will it actually solve the problem? We can apply some very easy solutions that don't actually solve the problem. In that case, it's not actually effective. We need more complicated solutions up to the point where it solves the problem. then how much will it cost to implement is another big problem. Whether we're talking about outside consultancies or even internal resources, time is money. So everything has a cost. So how long is it going to take? How much is it going to cost? Those are two major important questions. A project that can solve my problem in 2 months is more valuable to me than one that can do it in 6. So those are another things that we have to keep in mind. Also, one that's often overlooked, how much will it cost to maintain it? And maintenance means a couple of things. One, when we're talking about Azure solutions, we often talk about money because those solutions cost money. For instance, one of the technologies we'll talk about today, HDInsight, which only 4% of you had used. It's a relatively expensive resource. It's very powerful, but expensive. Versus there are other resources that are less powerful, but a little bit easier on the wallet. So that's something we have to keep in mind. Going back. Also, cost from a resourcing perspective is important too. Do we have the resources on staff to maintain a solution? For instance, if we walk in and an organization has a lot of SQL developers, a lot of very strong SQL talent, and we give them a Hadoop solution, will they be able to maintain that? Maybe, maybe not. So that's another consideration. Also, how quickly does our solution adapt to changing requirements? One thing that's existed in every company I've ever worked at is the goalposts eventually move. Whatever we thought was going to be the solution today is not going to work tomorrow for some reason. So we have to make sure that when we're constructing solutions, we construct solutions that are what's called future-proof, meaning this solution is going to be just as good or even better tomorrow than it was today. So that's another consideration. Now, we've talked about the different considerations. Let's look at what are the 4 different tools we're going to talk about here. The first tool we're going to talk about is the one that everybody here had heard of. 91% of you had even used it, which was awesome, and that's Power BI. While not technically a data science solution, as we'll see today, data science comes in a lot of different forms, and this is one that I often use to provide quick value on to customers. Second, we're going to talk about something called cognitive services, and we'll talk about exactly what that is. Another tool called Azure Machine Learning Studio that Mark mentioned during his opening, and I'm a huge advocate of. And finally, we're going to talk about R, Python, and HDInsight, which are the higher end of the game there. Another thing to point out is these are all part of a set of tools called Cortana Intelligence Suite. It's Microsoft's Azure offering around analytics. And the reason why this is so important is because these tools almost universally play nicely together. That's one of the big advantages of using a cohesive cloud solution like Azure, is all of the tools we use naturally work nicely together, which if we think about back to our customer problems, maintenance, maintaining a solution or even developing a solution that has nice connectors that automatically work together is a lot easier than having to custom build pipelines between things. So let's get to it. Like I said before, we're going to step into the shoes of a consultant, and here's the company we're going to work at. So I'm going to give you, let's say, 45 seconds to read this. Okay, so we're going to step into Contoso Beverage Company today. And we'll call them CBC for short. CBC is a large beverage distribution company in the United States. Their main source of revenue is selling cases of soda, tea, and other beverages to customers all over the world. So they're a retailer. Customers can place orders using CBC's intuitive website. So they're an online retailer, and that's also important. CBC also sells and services fountain beverage machines. However, this is a separate branch of the business that only takes orders over the phone. One of the things that we often find as consultants is not every branch of an organization functions the same. So we have one branch of the organization that is more advanced than the other, and we have to keep that in mind when we look at our possible solutions. So the first tool we're going to talk about today, Power BI. I'll go quickly through this because almost all of you have used it, but what is Power BI? Power BI is Microsoft's data analytics platform. It's often used for reporting and self-service BI. We see here on the right side of the screen a basic Power BI. I want to say this is a dashboard. I don't know my Power BI portal off the top of my head super well, but so this is a Power BI dashboard, and this is what customers can come look at all the time, whether they're managers or developers or whatever. This is where they can find their reports. A great advantage of Power BI is that self-service component, meaning that it's very user-friendly. It doesn't have a lot of development. It has a very high ceiling, meaning you can do a lot with Power BI if you're very skilled at it, but it also has a very low floor, meaning that people with very little experience can get into it, and that's a huge advantage. It also has the advantage of having both cloud and on-premises versions. So for organizations that may be wary of the cloud or maybe looking at hybrid approaches, Power BI is a potential solution for them. So let's look at our first business problem. Again, I'll give you a few seconds to read this. So CBC offers a lifetime warranty on all the fountain beverage machines they sell. The engineering team wants to perform quote unquote data science on their data in order to find out which types of machines they should be selling and who they should be selling to in order to reduce their repair costs in the future. This data is currently stored in multiple Excel files on the manager's laptop. It's very important to note that data science is in quotes here. Whenever we go and talk to customers about data science, there's one universal fact, and that's that they all think it means something different. Your very advanced customers may think data science means extremely complex R modules and things like that, which we'll talk about. However, your less mature customers might think data science just means analytics, in which case being able to dig through the buzzwords and get down to the actual source of the problem can be very helpful. And that's what we're going to do here. So why is Power BI the solution to this problem? Let's look at a couple of different factors. One, these are stored in Excel files. Power BI is extremely good at ingesting Excel files. It even has a semi-automated way that you can update Excel files in Power BI, which is something you don't find in a lot of other tools that ingest it. We know since this branch of the organization takes their orders over the phone, they are likely less mature from a technological perspective, and therefore they're not likely to have strong development teams. Therefore, giving them a tool that can be developed by power users and business experts provides them a lot of flexibility to be able to serve themselves, as it's called. Another advantage here is Power BI has a very quick implementation time frame. In fact, you can create a Power BI report just by downloading Power BI on your machine and importing the Excel file. There's nothing more complicated than that. You can get started. So it has a very quick implementation time frame, which can be very important for organizations that don't have a lot of money to spend on long projects. Also, the cost of ownership here is very low. Power BI it's either, I think it's $10 a month per user, unless it's gone up. So it's extremely cheap, much more cost efficient than a lot of the other solutions. In fact, Power BI Desktop is completely free, so in some use cases, customers can get away with no licensing cost at all. Combine that with the fact that it can be developed by their existing power users and business experts, meaning they don't have to hire anybody new to maintain this. It keeps that cost of ownership very low for them. Also, as their need grows, and this is something very important, we talked about future-proofing. As their need for this Power BI solution grows, the skill set is widely available in the market. You can find Power BI developers. You can train Power BI developers relatively easily. So those are all reasons why Power BI might be good enough. So here's the question. Does this solve the business problem? Is Power BI the right answer here? Oop, I missed a slide here. Let me go back to the business problem. So we were supposed to see this right after the picture, and that's my bad. So looking at this business problem, everything we've talked about, does Power BI solve this problem? So we read through it. The engineering team wants for data science to find out which types of machines they should be selling and who they should be selling to. Can we use Power BI to figure that out? We can create charts showing which types of machines have the highest profit margins, which types of machines have since they're warranty related, which types of machines have the lowest number of breakdowns, which types of machines cost the least to repair. Those are all things that we can easily pull up in Power BI and see to make these decisions. And we can do that same slicing with the customers as well. Which customers tend to be most profitable? Which customers have the least number of breakdowns? We can do all of that in Power BI, and combined with the fact that these are Excel files, makes Power BI a great solution to this problem. Let's move on. There we go. So we've talked about Power BI. Let's move on to cognitive services. It's a completely different type of solution from Power BI. So what is it? Cognitive services, another piece of Cortana Intelligence Suite, is a collection of 28 pre-built machine learning algorithms. Specifically, they're pre-built using Microsoft's data, and that matters for a number of reasons. So of these 28 cognitive services algorithms, one of them is called Luis. It's a language understanding and intelligence service, I think. And what it does is it decodes human speech. It can actually take human speech and read it. The advantage that has is if we were trying to code that ourselves using the frameworks exist for free on the market. The problem is we don't have that kind of data. We don't have nearly enough data to train the algorithm to understand human speech. We'd have to start tracking everything we write, somehow translating words into text. Microsoft has the Bing search engine, so they have an unlimited amount of data to train these models, and that's why these algorithms are so good. Not only are they pre-built, but they're trained using an amount of data we will never have access to. Again, let's look at a different business problem now. I'll give you a few seconds to read it. So CBC's website allows customers to leave comments about their orders. The customer service team wants to perform quote unquote data science on their data to find out which types of customers and or orders tend to leave negative feedback. This data is currently stored in a SQL Server table. This is a very common thing. I see it almost every organization I go into. They have some sort of comment table, some sort of feedback table, but they don't do anything with it. It just sits there in text. Oh, why is cognitive services a good solution to this problem? Cognitive services are all easily accessible as Azure APIs. You literally just go up to the Azure portal and you say, I want to use this, and it gives you access to an API key, and you just access it the way you'd access any other API. And the majority of organizations that have any sort of data warehousing will often have the ability to directly interact with APIs, either through integration services or something like it. Next, these pre-built algorithms don't require data or training. That's good because one, we likely won't have a tremendous amount of data to train with. Also, we might not have the resources who are capable of doing that. Natural language processing is not an easy task to do on your own. So it often requires more experienced developers who also cost more in order to train these. So if we're able to leverage the pre-built algorithms, it saves us a lot of time and money there. Also, since these are pre-built, the implementation time frame is very quick. All we have to do is worry about how we integrate it. We don't have to worry about building the algorithm itself. Again, the cost of ownership here is relatively low. These pre-built algorithms do charge per every time you hit it. So it can get pricey if you do things like continually hit every comment every night. But if you just train new comments as they come in and use a little bit of a simple approach to create your integration, you often find that cognitive services has a very low cost of ownership overall. Again, being straight APIs, you can access this via a number of different skill sets, all of which are widely available in the market and which most organizations already have on hand. So let's look back at the business problem again. We say that CBC's website allows customers to leave comments about their orders. The fact that they have a website tells me that they also have a development team, meaning that they have people capable of accessing APIs, because most web developers will have that sort of skill set. Customer service team wants to perform data science on their data. They have data. That's another key here. But they want to find out which types of customers and orders tend to receive negative feedback. Negative feedback is a very hard thing to define. There's a concept called sentiment, which is often used to decode human speech. And there is a cognitive services algorithm that does exactly that. So we see that the use case we're looking for fits neatly into one of the pre-built cognitive services algorithms. Also, the data is stored in a SQL Server table, meaning that our SSIS team, our integration team, or ETL developers, whatever we call them, will likely have these skills combined with the web developers to be able to access these APIs and get them to work. So now we're back to the same question again. Does this solve the business problem? And we've talked about all the reasons why cognitive services may be the solution here. I will say it's certainly not the only solution. It may not even be the best solution for a given customer. Our job here is not to give hard and fast facts and truths about this is always the right solution. Simply here to kind of open the horizons a little bit and say we have options and here's what they are. So let's move on to a different tool, one of my personal favorites, a tool called Azure Machine Learning Studio. What is Azure Machine Learning? We see on the right side a little snippet of Azure Machine Learning. It looks an awful lot like SSIS or any of the other ETL tools you may have used before, except instead of moving data around, its goal is generally to train and productionalize machine learning models, but it functions in a very similar manner. So it is a machine learning workbench. In its entirety, a user can build fully production-worthy machine learning models in this tool by itself. It can also perform data analytics, which makes a nice addition there because we can both build the machine learning models as well as do some sort of data analysis along with it if we need to. A big selling point is that it's not entirely drag and drop, but it's mostly drag and drop. If you're interested in seeing more about it, you can obviously check out the webinars that are going on over the next couple of months. And finally, it's an entirely cloud software as a service, meaning we don't have to maintain or build anything. We literally go to the Azure portal, we say, I want an Azure Machine Learning Workspace, here's the name, boom, it's spun up. In fact, there's even a way to get this for free if you wanted to. You can just Google Azure Machine Learning Studio and sign up for it, and you can get a completely free version that doesn't have anything to do with your Azure subscription. So that gives it a lot of flexibility that we can put it in any organization. On top of that, it's extremely inexpensive. It is right around Power BI pricing. I think it's $10 per person per month, but instead of Power BI, where the pricing is based on users, this is based on people who actually run experiments. So everybody on your staff doesn't need a Azure Machine Learning Studio seat. Only your data scientists or developers, meaning that most organizations will only need 5 or 10 seats, which makes it $100 a month, which is a lower footprint than you'll find in any other piece of software. So with all that in mind, let's read our next business problem. Another team within CBC has reached out to us. This says that CBC's customer churn rate, that means customers who leave us and no longer buy our products, has been steady for the past 3 years. The account management team can see this information using their existing set of reports and dashboards in Power BI. They want to perform quote unquote data science to develop an algorithm for predicting when particular customers are likely to churn. That means, when is this customer going to stop buying my products? They will use this information to reach out to these customers and attempt remediation. This data is currently stored in a SQL Server data mart. So the question here is, why is Azure Machine Learning a good solution for this problem? First, we saw that they had these Power BI reports, and we'll mention that again later, meaning that they have data professionals. Somebody's building these reports, and Azure Machine Learning is very accessible to those types of people. If you have even reasonable BI skills, you will likely pick up Azure Machine Learning Studio very easily. It also expands enough that if you do have data science experience, you can still get a lot out of it. So it covers a broad swath of professionals. Like the other tools we talked about, it also has a quick implementation time frame. Creating an Azure Machine Learning Studio experiment is literally just create new experiment and you're done. And it's drag and drop all the way through. I often can create an Azure Machine Learning Studio experiment all the way to production within a week or two, which is far less time than we often see in other tools. And that's because it does a lot of the work for us. Again, like we talked about, the cost of ownership here is very low. Again, licensing costs are virtually non-existent, and we don't need to hire advanced data scientists. Having them on staff can certainly allow us to get more out of this tool, but we don't need them to even get started, which keeps our cost of ownership low. To productionalize Azure Machine Learning, we can deploy them as APIs. In fact, deploying an Azure Machine Learning API is literally also a couple of clicks. And all we would need after that is the ability to hit those APIs, which, like we talked about before, an organization that has BI professionals and an existing data warehouse, which this one does because we have data marts, likely also has the ability to interact with APIs easily. And finally, we have some ability to expand the horizons of Azure Machine Learning Studio. It does allow us to use SQL, R, and Python in limited amounts. So if we have those abilities, we can expand the potential pool of models that we can use. So looking back at the business problem again, CBC's customer churn rate. We look at churn. Churn is often what's known as a classification model, meaning is this customer likely to leave me in the next 3 months? Yes or no? We can predict it like that. We can also predict how many months until this customer churns is another way to define that problem. Both of those can easily be done at Azure Machine Learning Studio. We see that the account management team already has existing reports and dashboards in Power BI, meaning that they have data professionals, so people that can likely use Azure Machine Learning Studio. And they want to develop an algorithm for predicting when customers are likely to churn. That's very much a predictive modeling question, falls well within the Azure Machine Learning realm. And they will use this information to reach out to these customers and attempt remediation. And data is currently stored in a SQL Server data mart, meaning that whatever solution we have needs to be able to integrate with their data where it lives. And Azure Machine Learning can definitely integrate with SQL Server quite easily. So, same question again. Does this solve the business problem? Let's talk about the final set of tools. These are R, Python, and HDInsight. This set of tools probably has more individual components than all of the other ones we've talked about combined. There are a lot of different ways to use R, Python, and or HDInsight for data science solutions. So first, let's talk about what are they. So what are R and Python? We can see them over on the right side. For those that are interested, the top set of code is R and the bottom set of code is Python. But as you can see, they're coding languages. So they are the most common coding languages out there. In fact, if you're looking for data science experience, you're almost guaranteed to have experience in either R or Python, if not both. It's currently supported in Microsoft SQL Server. R was integrated in 2016 and Python's been integrated in 2017. There's also some areas in which you can integrate R into Azure SQL Database, which offers some fun options there. You can integrate, like we talked about before, R and Python can integrate into Azure Machine Learning Studio. But there's also another tool called the Azure Machine Learning Workbench, which is basically a Python development environment. And there are a lot of webinars on that too. It's a neat tool. For your big data needs, and we'll touch on that in our business case, we also have the option of using R and Python in either Azure Data Lake Analytics, which is Microsoft's first-party version of a big data solution, or HDInsight, which we'll talk about in a second. So if we have R Python skills and we need to use them, we have a lot of different places we can use them. That's flexibility, and that's important. Before we get to that, let's talk about what is HDInsight. If we look at on the right side again, HDInsight is a lot of coding. The language you see on the right side is Scala, which is kind of like Java. But HDInsight is Azure's implementation of Hadoop. It is a big data infrastructure / platform as a service. It kind of runs that line depending on how you want to define it. It is that same 2-click experience you get in Azure. Say create HDInsight cluster, you give it a couple configuration options and off it goes. There are 7 different flavors of HDInsight. You can look up what those are, but they're different Hadoop configurations, which are very good for different types of big data needs. And there's also a new first-party offering for Microsoft called Databricks, which is basically a data science development environment for an organization where all your developers can kind of work together. And it's a layer on top of Spark. Another advantage, one that we haven't seen in the other offerings so far, is HDInsight is extremely scalable. It's as far as I'm aware, there's no real set limit on how much we can scale. Hadoop clusters, I know Microsoft has a cap on how many nodes you can spin up in your cluster, but it's extremely large. Now, with all of that in mind, let's look at this last business problem. This says that CBC's online sales system contains 10,000 different products and processes over 1 million orders per day. So a lot of information goes through this system. The marketing team would like to perform data science, quote unquote, to recommend additional products to their customers while they use the online system. This data is stored in an Azure Data Lake store. A couple of things to look at right away. One, this data is stored in Azure Data Lake store, which means there's a lot of it. Also, they want to recommend additional customers while recommend additional products to customers while they use the online system, meaning we need a live interface here. We need some way to do all this live. It can't be batch processed. So why would a combination of R, Python, and HDInsight be an option here? First of all, everything we've talked about up until now has had limitations. R and Python and HDInsight virtually eliminate those. There really aren't many data problems out there in the world that you can't solve in some way, shape, or form using a combination of these tools. R has thousands of open source libraries, so does Python. Just about any situation you're in, there's something out there that can help you. Also, we saw that we have very large amounts of data. HDInsight is perfect for consuming those massive amounts of data, depending on what configuration you use, and we won't get into what the configurations are in this talk. Also, if we use a coding language like R or Python, it gives a single set of tools for data scientists to use. So let's say that we want to use Python to build all of our machine learning models. We can deploy that to HDInsight. We can deploy that to SQL Server. We can use that from Azure Machine Learning Workbench. Basically, no matter where we need to use it, we can all use the same language, which means we can reuse code, and we only need one set of skill set among our developers. Both of those are very efficient and go to those earlier questions we were asking. And finally, this skill set, while not incredibly common right now, it is relatively expensive. It is rapidly increasing. So we are finding a lot of new resources coming onto the market that have R and Python skills, and a lot of existing professionals are extending into that space as well. So looking back at the business problem, like we talked about, why is this the correct solution? Or why is this a correct solution? Maybe not the best. So we have 10,000 products and 1 million orders per day. That's a lot of different combinations. We have to look through 10,000 different products for 1 million orders every single day. And we want to recommend that live. Both of those tell me that we need to look for a very fast, very powerful set of tools. Maybe more so than, say, Azure Machine Learning Studio or Power BI could really handle. So looking at this, does this solve the business problem? Back to that same question again. So what's the takeaway from this whole talk? If we think of everything we've seen today, we have, let's say, a two-dimensional chart. There's really more than 2 dimensions, but we try to think of it in simpler terms. On the vertical here, we've got what's the scope of the implementation? What do we have to do? How much do we have to do? How hard is it going to be? All those different types of questions. And then on the horizontal, we've got what's the cost of ownership? Meaning, how much does it take to hire people or pay people to do these jobs? How much do the tools themselves cost? All of that comes into play. The first three tools we talked about today are on the lower end of this chart. They don't do a whole lot outside of their particular realm. They don't scale super well, but they're also very fast to implement and very easy to maintain. So they generally have low cost of ownership, which can be very beneficial in some business situations. Up towards the top of the chart, we have R, Python, and Hadoop. They have that really strong scope. They can do just about anything, but they come with hefty price tags. R and Python are technically free because they're just coding languages, but HDInsight clusters can get pricey quickly. So again, it depends on your need. So like we said, we lump the bottom ones into this fast and easy, but limited scope. And then the top three tools come into the slower, more difficult realm, but they have virtually unlimited scope. And that takes us back to the whole point of this talk. What's the easiest way to solve the business problem? And that's what we as consultants really need to keep in the back of our mind. It's not about what we really like doing. It's not about what we think the coolest tools are. It's about what's the easiest way we can solve the business's problems so that they can go on doing what they need to do. I want to thank everybody for coming. Like Mark talked about before, I did give a presentation last week on what is a data scientist and how do I become one. It's on YouTube now, so if you wanted to jump into data science and look at different ways to do that, it's a great place to look. We also talked about Azure Machine Learning Studio in this talk. If you're interested in finding out more about that, I've got a couple of other presentations, one of which is coming up here in a few weeks at another group. But I will open up to questions at this point, and if you need to reach out to me, all my contact information is right there.
Okay, thanks, Brad. So we have some people still in attendance. Obviously, the focus for today was looking at data science through an architectural lens, and just to support Brad's message for today, many times organizations want to do data science, and we are talking about enterprise tools. We were talking about taking your whole organization along, and I really like, Brad, how you were anchoring each section with a business problem. And I know maybe the words went by too fast, but that's okay. We have the video available if you want to go back and look at it. But the main thing is that business problems do drive the entire data science solution. And then so many of the factors that Brad talked about are so important. And, you know, I can say, supporting my work for Microsoft Consulting, these are the critical areas that we end up talking with stakeholders, you know, supporters of projects. So I'm going to start with that question, Brad. You know, in discussions you've had with clients, you know, what do you think are some of the things that come up in that first discussion when people are thinking about data science?
The most common question we get is, you know, everybody has a lot of ideas of, oh, I know data science can revolutionize my industry or revolutionize my organization. We're often called in by these real visionaries who want to take that leap. But their questions always revolve around, what is it and how do I do it? And not only that, how do I do it so that it fits into my organization nicely? Because one-off solutions are very easy to do, but they're not very impactful. So our goal is to create holistic solutions. And that's what we end up talking to customers a lot about.
Mm-hmm. And in some of the clients that you can think of that were most successful, I mean, clients where you think that they have achieved their goals, how would you characterize some of the factors that led toward that success?
That's a great question, and honestly, that's a talk all in itself. But if I had to pick a few reasons, one, top-down leadership is huge. I've seen a lot of projects not successful, not because they weren't good solutions, but because we didn't have buy-in from the top down. Mm-hmm. Also, making sure that the solution fits the business. I've often seen organizations build solutions that are either too complex or using a different set of skills than the organization has on hand. So it's unwieldy to maintain. It eventually just falls into that same data swamp that we see a lot. So catering the solutions towards the executives' business goals, while also keeping track of what the organization has on hand as skill sets and resources.
Mm-hmm. And of course, in this talk today, you were talking about a range of technologies from Power BI to Cortana Intelligence Suite, Azure Machine Learning Studio. We covered HDInsight. My question for you is, and of course we see that the spectrum of the attendees today, many people have seen Power BI and may even be representative of the types of audiences or clients that you might encounter. My question for you is, as they're getting into data science, what are some of the, what are some of the techniques or, hands-on techniques that you have for the people who are going to be doing the technical work as they're getting involved in these technologies? I know you mentioned some of them, but maybe repeat some of that.
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Sure. So you have people who want to do hands-on, they're hands-on Power BI, and now they want to be hands-on maybe with HDInsight to try it out, or some of these other technologies.
Mm-hmm.
How are they get started?
So yeah, a great way to get started is if your organization has a Visual Studio Enterprise license, you may actually have access to a lot of free Azure credits, which is a great way to get started in that case. Azure also offers free trials. So if you have a new email address and you want to spin up an HDInsight cluster, you can type in your new email address and it'll give you $100 of free credits you can use to create your first HDInsight cluster. And along with that, just pick a tool that interests you and then find videos online and books and whatnot, and just work with your hands is the best thing I have there.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So anyone else have a question, you can feel free to type it into the question box and we'll give you a minute to do that. Of course, Brad said he mentioned earlier that he's based in the Charlotte area. Are you working on a upcoming SQL Saturday?
We are. Our SQL Saturday is usually not until October, so
okay.
we're not quite there yet.
Right. So it'll be later this year. I do remember, I think I did go to, yes, I did definitely go to SQL Saturday in Charlotte at the past, and I think it was held at the Microsoft office in Charlotte. Is that where you're hosting now or another location?
I think we just moved. Last year we had it at CPCC, which is a local community college here. They let us use a lot of their rooms.
That's awesome. We're in the Atlanta area. We are partnering also with a local university, and we find their setup to be something that's very efficient, as far as the presentations. We have rooms of projectors, and then the rooms are already set up for us to be able to do several sessions. So here's a question for you, and I'm going to let you dive into this. Does Azure ML Workbench support RNNs and LSTMs? So he's referring to recurrent neural networks and LSTMs, long short-term memory, and he's referring to deep learning. What do you have on that?
So I'm tangentially familiar with those things. I don't often dive that deep into the space myself. But Azure Machine Learning Workbench fully supports Python. So you can import any Python libraries you need. And there are a lot of Python libraries that are very good at getting into deep learning. So as long as there's a Python library for it, you can do it in Azure Machine Learning Workbench.
Right. And I'll go ahead and mention my videos on Wintellect now on deep learning. And to add to what Brad said, because Python is available, one may therefore access MXNet, TensorFlow, and of course we would love you to check out Microsoft Cognitive Toolkit, which is CNTK. And by the way, in the data science VM, as a side note, in the data science VM, there are some Jupyter notebooks that allow you to do some benchmarking across the different deep learning frameworks. And I may show that at a future event, but these notebooks, I didn't even write them, but they are out there on GitHub. And by the way, I think it's still true that of the major organizations contributing to GitHub, I think number 2 is Facebook and number 1 is Microsoft. So Microsoft, just letting you know, is all into open source and making contributions to the community. So hopefully that was helpful. And hopefully you're using Python. I think it's so a Python and Brad, you've seen this. Python now is becoming a primary development language. Of course, for Spark is one of them that's taking Python as a first-class citizen along.
Mhm.
And there's so many technologies now supporting Python. So that is hopefully helpful. Does anyone else have any questions? So we're wrapping up here. I'll give you a moment. And I know you talked about some other presentations you have. Let's see, Machine Learning Studio, 4 tips from the pros. And then you also have Azure Machine Learning Studio, making data science easier. Are you doing demos in these other talks?
Yes, the Making Data Science Easier is almost a full demo for a introduction, and 4 tips from the pros is kind of a second level to that, but it's also about 50% demo. So
okay. I'm going to talk. You've already shown them on the screen, so now we're going to go. We're going to have to schedule you. So we'll talk about that offline about when that will happen. I mean,
my master plan is successful.
You can't. I know you can't. You can't just come here. I mean, he did it last week too. He showed these like, oh, by the way, we got these other talks. No, but we do have almost unlimited capacity to hold sessions. I have 2 other facilitators that also can do what I'm doing and hosting the session. So all of us have day jobs, so we're not always necessarily available in a certain spot, but we do have redundancy, and we can run these sessions at different times. We also may look into running sessions that are friendly for our viewers in other countries too. So we may have to look into doing that in the future. So Brad, I want to thank you for being here today, and we will be posting this to YouTube in the next few days, and then sending out a notice on the email list of when that's posted. And Brad, thank you for presenting today.
Thanks so much for having me, and thanks for coming, everyone.